was watching The Departed, Martin Scorsese's Academy Award-winning film, and the premise is an old one. It's an ancient one, and the premise is that you try to get somebody inside on the other side. You know, the bad guy tries to groom somebody to be their cop, and the cops try to groom somebody to be the perfect undercover agent. And there's been many expressions for this. You know, the spy within, the fifth column, you know, that force that you trust, that force that you admire, that turns out to be the one that stabs you in the back. I'm a messenger of the form principle, and I have a deep respect for womankind and the yin. And this is a place where the fix is really in against women. And it's brought to you by one of these duplicitous creatures, you know. And by the way, I want you to understand my selection process when it comes to putting a face to one of the faces. This is chemistry, after all, and you can find equivalents in every culture. I look for the face that best represents the sum total of the chemistry. I might have used Vesta here as an example. There are aspects of Vesta that belong here. There are many other variations of the goddess Godheads that carry equivalencies in different cultures. But nobody better exemplifies it, at least for me, this face, than Parvati. You know, to the Shakta, she is divine Godhead. I mean, you know, up there in the highest echelons, commonly understood to be the consort and wife of Shiva, the mother of Ganesh. And she embodies some of the deepest traditions of Hindu society. A society that was always heavily populated compared to others. I mean, when Alexander arrived there, he couldn't believe how many people. I mean, and what is so interesting about Parvati is that she basically symbolizes three things. One is fertility. One is, how should we call this, marriage felicity. And the third is devotion to the spouse. These are the themes that she carries. So let's take a look and see how this works. We are looking at Sarin. And you can see that this is not a simple chemistry at all. As a matter of fact, it is a deeply complex chemistry. The face below with its 4 gates in our progression as we move around the wheel now in civilization. And of course above the 58, the 54, which is part of Sarin, but obviously is on the other side of the wheel. You'll also notice that there are some very, very interesting configurations here. The 58 and the 52, the 54, 53. You know, we are dealing with quite significant oppositions in that sense. But just to simply recognize that Saren is this complex, very complex codon with 6 different gates. Now remember that my introduction to you about the spy within and my heavy tone about Parvati. First of all, what are we looking at? I mean, look at this configuration. Look at the wheel. And when you look at the wheel, one of the things that you get to see is that these 2 gates up here and 3 of these gates here are all here in the root. The only exception is the 15th gate here in the G center. In other words, out of the 6 aspects of Saren, 5 of the aspects are root. A root. If you listen to my radio show today on stress, it was inspired by preparing the illustration for Saren. You know, you've got 5 root gates. So the first thing to understand about sweet old Parvati is that she is a chemistry of pressure and stress. Pressure and stress. You see, there is a disproportionate stress that is placed on the female of the species. It's the first thing to grasp about this. See, this chemistry is in everyone. But you see, the aspect of this chemistry that demands devotion to the spouse, and I'll explain why, which is a sacrifice for the female principle, is that devotion to spouse, which is in their chemistry and means one thing, is in the male chemistry and means totally another. For the male, it is freedom, in a sense, not to be correct or balanced in their relationship with the female. And that there is a sense that the female must, because it is ingrained in every male, this chemistry is in every male. That the female is supposed to be devoted to them. It is the female that felicitates the marriage. It is the female that is mistress of the home. Yes, yes, yes. Devotion, felicitation to the marriage, fertility. You see, there is an enormous pressure placed on being able to establish what is the life cycle on the planet. We saw with the 10th phase that the material dimension is something that is essential because we have the demands of the long nurturing process of what it is to be human. But how are you going to maintain that? How are you going to maintain these bonds? How are you going to hold these bonds together long enough? How? And you see, the program doesn't throw dice. It's the one thing that, well, more than one, be nice, Raw, that Albert got right. You know, it doesn't throw dice. The dice are loaded. It knows precisely because the program's set. And it's set against the yin. Now when I say against, you know this is a duality. Someone had to have one side of the tension of relationship, and someone had to have the other side. Let's put it that way. And it is the yin that ended up paying the price for this. The price for this, by the way, is males that do not appreciate females. That's the price. Males that take females for granted. That's the price. Males that abuse females, that's the price. Little girls that aren't educated, that's the price. Because it's not something that's simply in the female. It's in the male as well. This is Parvati's work. I'm not a great fan, as you can tell. I'm not. Because I see the fix. And I see that in that sense, when you look out, because it's one thing for me to speak coldly about hierarchies and fractals. It is another thing that I am aware of the deep suffering on this planet. And that it seems so, I think you, Susanna, said the word cruel. It can seem so cruel. I look out at the disenfranchisement of the female, something that I have lectured about for nearly 20 years now. And it's not like the education of the male is going to help that much. I mean, it does to a degree, and we know that. But all of those males of the third world, they carry Parvati chemistry. They carry the chemistry that says that they are entitled to devotion. That the maintenance of the marriage is the responsibility of the female. Let alone the fertility bit. And you see, without sounding crude or punning, Parvati doesn't screw around. Look at the pressure that this chemistry brings. Look at this pressure. And what is so curious is that the only thing that is not under pressure, and I love this, this chemistry combination, UCU. Well, let's hope UCU. Yes. Anyway, UCU is 15. And this is the love of humanity or the hate of humanity, I mean, whether humanity is going to be held together, whether there is truly ultimately going to be a flow, all of this is going to be dependent on pair bonding. We know that. And all you have to do is look at a body graph to understand what pair bonding is all about. You've got what's colored in, and it's looking for what it doesn't have colored in. Pair bonding. Genetic imperative. Be attracted to what you are not. Everything about our world is based on pair bonding. Everything. We do not exist without it preceding us. There is no existence unless we produce it. Pair bonding. And because that is the formula, then there is this enormous pressure to maintain it. Enormous pressure. See, the chemistry is so revealing. When you see the chemistry in the body graph, you know what the physicists can never know. At least not now. Never is not correct, but not now. They don't know. They don't know that all of this is in the root center. They don't know that all of this is connected to the adrenal system. They don't know that it's placing pressure on our emotional system, our immune system. They don't know that. They don't know that it puts pressure on whether we are going to be, cyclical or focused. They don't know that. They don't know all the things that we know in the body graph. It is this juxtaposition of the chemistry with the body graph that also reveals something else. It reveals what you cannot see in the body graph. This is not duality. This is the quarter of civilization. If you look here specifically, you do not see any real sexuality. If you look here very carefully, you do not see a social channel. You don't see these things here. Because they're not about what happens on the surface in the way in which the drive of the genetic imperative works. It's about something much, much deeper. It's about establishing civilization itself. And the burden is given to womankind. Here, carry this weight. This is the way you do it. You carry the weight. You can see it. You know, the third world, those classic images, because there are 1 billion people that have to travel at least 2 kilometers to find water. That there are hundreds of millions of women right now anywhere in the world that are carrying water on their shoulders. Felicity to the marriage, devotion to the spouse, fertility. These are instruments of civilization dictated by the program. What to do? Let's take a look at some of the aspects. And let's begin with, one of the fundamentals of human design. And, one of the basic entry points in understanding, mechanical dynamics in the body graph is really to come to grips with formats. They are very special. A couple of years ago in Ibiza, I did a really deep series on the formats, and it was very exciting to do them again, because I hadn't for many years. I hadn't since I was first teaching circuitry mechanics. But to understand that this codon carries 2 format energies. They're collective. So both the logical process, that is the patterns that are established, and the patterns for the future, and the abstract, the cyclical process, the past, the inspiration derived from experience, that both the experiential and the experimental, that identification and expectation, that all of it is rooted here in Sarin. There is no past without the Parvati civilization. There is no future without it. It is built into the roadmap, and there is no escape. There is no escape. I mean, it is interesting to think about, I'm a boomer. So I grew up with the birth of feminism and the demands of women, most of which has taken place in this century, that is to get the vote, to try to get to a point where they get equal pay for equal work. I mean, even in the most advanced Western societies, with very few exceptions, there is still a marked difference between same job, between the sexes, and what their pay is going to be. And the effort that has been made in the West for several hundred years in terms of general education, mixed public education, equal standards, and university, and blah blah blah, and all of this stuff. But then you look at this world, and particularly the so-called advantaged West. Relationships, are something that struggle. It is a major theme. I mean, after all these things are beginning to break down. I mean, the marriage bond is consummated in the 1949. This is breaking down. The bond is held together by the strength of community. This is breaking down. And you can see it here in Sarin, because Sarin has a clock. It's the 39th gate. And of course the 39th gate is the gate that is the pressure for the mutation that is changing everything. It's changing everything. And it means that this process that has been going on for millennium, that we inherited from the seven-centered being, this is seven-centered construct, is finally coming to an end. Because this is going to mutate and change. And it's going to affect everything here. There's so much that we inherited from the seven-centered being. We have no nine-centered gods yet, unless we think about Sedna and Eris and dysnomia. And everything about our lives, everything about our spirituality, our religiosity, our anthropology, all of it is rooted in the seven-centered being. It wasn't that long ago that they disappeared, after all. I mean, I remind you that the last child born before the change in 1781, let's say they lived 100 years. That means they lived till 1881. They were here a long time. Everything that we have inherited from them. After all, when you think about the cross of the cycle of planning, I should say, which began at the beginning of the 17th century, 1610, for the first 160 years of our present cycle, there were only seven-centered beings. I mean, this is a cycle in which the transition is taking place, and we're deeply, deeply locked into the seven-centered parameters. We really are. And of course, we're dealing with a great change that's coming. That is, pentas don't have a sex. I mean, pentas don't have a sex. That means that raves, which will incarnate to selflessly give themselves as a resource to a conscious penta, that penta will not have a sex, nor will it have a bonding principle, at least not as we understand it. Certainly not in the way in which the juxtaposition of male and female has been an instrument of this evolutionary pattern. I mean, I'm pleased to see the end of the Parvati game. I think that it has caused enormous suffering on this planet, continues to do so. And it's, it's not a matter of fault and blame. It's simply about seeing it and understanding it, and in doing so, be able to accept it. I mean, after all, it is about coming to grips with the nature of being and the cold logic of the progression of the program, because there is this perfect cold logic to it. It has a greater agenda. It's not like it's a personality itself. It's not like there is a Parvati in that sense. Parvati in that sense. It's a crystal bundle. It's a consciousness field. And it's a consciousness field that provides the very ingredients that substantiate the process. You see, at the same time that I can see the chemistry of Parvati as being a chain and a prison and a deep limitation for womankind, it's also, of course, the other side of the story. It is that they are the ones truly that have carried us from the past into the future and will continue to do so. And it is not so much devotion to the spouse as the seven-centered being so deeply understood that. It is the devotion to, the way of moving forward, to the process itself. There is, after all, in all of us, the genetic imperative to be attracted to what we are not. For many, devotion is not such a difficult thing. But for others, this construct, it puts an enormous burden on womankind to maintain the world. It just does. And to maintain the world through nurturing their children. And mostly their sons. So odd. It's a good thing there's a 39th gate. You know? I mean, as we move through the codons, as we saw with histidine, when you see a gate in a codon that's part of the mutative transition, you know that there's going to be a change. We know that fertility is something that is going to begin to struggle. We know that human fertility is no longer something that is going to be number one on the agenda. We know that there is going to be a transition to the individual and to the demands of individual authority. That the pair bond system is something that is going to begin to break down, but more so that there is no future for it. The rave will not be more dependent on the yin than the yang. I mean, it won't be the point. That's the thing about understanding that conscious penta transcends human or human-like considerations. So we have these four elements in the face. The 15th gate, the rhythm. In the end, all of Seren, in a way, is expressed through the 15th gate. This rhythm of humanity. The way in which humanity is held together in a flow. And that you can see that here in the 15th gate, that the responsibility to maintain the flow is irrevocably female. Think about all the divorces. And there are zillions of them. And you think about all those divorces and you think about where are the children? And the vast majority, not all, obviously, but the vast majority are with their mothers. It's the mothers that maintain the continuity of civilization. It's the mothers that maintain the continuity of hearth and home and all of those things. And it's not necessarily because, quote unquote, they want to or expect to. It's in their chemistry. It's in their chemistry. It's not something that they can escape. It's not something that they can erase, remove, argue with. It's simply there. And in the male, in that situation of divorce, what is there from this chemistry in them just convinces them that their ex-partner should be looking after the child, And maybe if they're lucky, they'll pay for it. Maybe. See, it's in the chemistry. That's what makes it so shocking in a way, to actually be able to see it. To really be able to see it. Think about the 52nd gate. Keeping still mountain. This incredible stillness, to really just sit on it and focus on it. And the pressure is what? The pressure is to go step by step by step. What does a mother tell her daughter about a man? You know, the boy that she wants to be with, whatever. They're never perfect. And it's going to take you years to get them to be, well, the way it might work for you. You know, it's always a project. It's always a job. It's always that focus that's necessary in order to maintain that home, that civilization, that construct. It's not personal, it's not about the man. It's not personal, it's not about the child. It's in the chemistry to build the civilization. This is how you build the civilization. One home after another. One, cultural stamp after another. Focused on the management, the felicity. Focused on the devotion. Focused on the fertility. Focused. It's a pressure. And you know, if you're a woman and you've had a family, you know that at some point, finally, at some point, that pressure diminishes. Your reward is that they grow up and leave you. You know? And you've established the next generation with the same patterns. The very sons that come out of your body are the very males who are going to expect that devotion and felicity and fertility. Not because they know any better. They don't. But it's in their chemistry. And it's chemistry that is always pointed at how they relate to the female. It's really incredible when you think about it. And the 53, always wanting something new, always wanting to be free. How one has to struggle one cycle after the next. What marriage doesn't go through the 7-year itch? The 14 and the 21, and so forth and so on. Cells change. Yeah. It's interesting that the 53rd gate is the the sadness of a dog on a chain, and the 52nd gate can be a prison cell. I don't mean to be depressing, ladies. But trying to keep that dog on a chain sometimes can really feel like, well, an awful lot of work. An awful lot of work. And the 39, despite the fact that it is in transition, that this is the part of the, Parvati that gives or empowers, at least in some ways, the female, because of its power of provocation. It's not like their power is lost. After all, this is one face, it's one codon, it's an aspect of chemistry. It can be never taken out of context. And we are talking about personality programming. We're talking about mind programming. So we see the deep influence on the male mind and how it is built into them unless there are counter forces. It's locked in as chemistry. there's something really important, in a sense, graphically to notice here. First of all, we have specific relationships. That is the 58 and the 39. And that relationship is their top binary. And you can see that here with the 54, with the 15. So they have that relationship. Obviously, in dealing with civilization, we're dealing with a yin-yin quarter. And in here, because we are dealing with oppositions, the 58, in fact, to the 52, and the 54 to the 53, that what we have here is a yang-yang on the other side. It's a very, very strong yang dynamic. And then you can see that in the center, we have a flipping, if you can put it that way. In other words, we go from the yang-yin to the yin-yang. So we've got two mirrors here, if you notice. And it's getting confusing for you. Okay. You got two mirrors here. If you take this 39 and this 58, and you take the lower half, you can see that they're an exact mirror to each other. In other words, the flipping of the yin and the yang combination and the opposition of the yin-yin and the yang-yang. And then they have this commonality. So I'm just showing you the way in which they connect to each other. But obviously there's going to be a different impact here. There's going to be a different impact. And where you can really feel that in both of these cases, and again, the commonality here is this dominance. After all, there are 9 gates in the root center and 5 of them are serine. So serine is an enormous part of what is the pressure system. And what is interesting about the face 11, and if you look at the diagram, you can sort of see it, is that face 11 deals with the gates that are going upward to the sacral, and the one gate, the 39, which is the mutative trigger, which is moving towards the solar plex. And that you can see that these two, the 58 and the 54, they're on the splenic side, not the emotional side. In other words, their commonality is that they are mirrors of the same thing in the emotional system. And they are all deeply connected to the pressure and the adrenalization that is there, that is part of what the root is all about. And think about something else. If you've got an undefined root center, you're potentially amplifying pressure. The undefined root center is somebody that, feels driven to get married at a young age, this kind of thing. Feels driven to get things done with, have a family quickly. There can be all kinds of incredible pressure that result here when this root center is open. It's something else. As long as I've been teaching the body graph, I've tried many, many times to remind people that the root center, because it doesn't get a lot of attention, that the root center is of enormous importance. It is the base of our kundalini, if you want to put it that way. It is of enormous importance, and it is very profound. There is endless material here in the root. But now you have a new perspective on the root. Half of its pressure is to build civilization through the role of women relative to men. Half of its pressure is that. And that's really something to grasp. The 58 and the 54, they're fascinating in their own way. The 58th gate, the joyous, is all about the energy to challenge, and it is the energy to challenge the mother-father. And the 54 is the energy of ambition, the energy to rise up. You see, built into Seren is not simply the imperative of the mother, That is the imperative of the mother to carry the burden of, civilization. But it is also there to provide them with what they're doing it for, in a sense. This is not simply about what I've been describing, which is the dilemma that arises when a woman by chemistry is defined to a specific role. Because of course that isn't the point. It is only in terms of the way I've been discussing it. It is there in order to be able to create the potential of civilization, which is based on producing children. Remember the fertility of Parvati. Producing children. And producing children who will carry within them the readiness to challenge their mother and father. The readiness for them to be ambitious and to want to have more. And that the mother, in carrying it, will encourage it and be aware of it, be aware of the need to be able to deal with the challenge to their motherhood, the challenge to their authority, and at the same time to nurture the ambition of their young. The program. And of course this is also in the male. And the male sucks up on this. It's yang at its base. It says I can challenge the female. She has to be devoted to me and I can challenge her. Again, to see that within the male consciousness, all of this information is going to work in a totally different way. It is going to give them the sense of entitlement. It is going to give them a sense of power. Mechanics, they are they're so deeply revealing. The 58 and the 54 are pressures that drive us towards primal fears. Very, very, very basic fears. Underlying every male and female and every child is fear of the other. It's also here. The fear of the female, of the not self-rage and potential violence of the male. The fear of the male, suppressed, repressed, of the female power. The fear of the child, of these beings, these huge giants that control their lives. Fear. It's all there. And of course, fear for me is a very beautiful thing, in the sense that it is the root of intelligence. You have to, there are things that need to be learned. The better educated we are, the better our cross-gender relationships are. It helps. It helps. After all, these are 6 gates out of 64. It isn't carrying some kind of majority vote. But you have to see how powerful it is. And that there is no denying it. There isn't. It's the joke of the 54th gate being the marrying maiden. It's just so deeply pervasive in the way in which our world works. And it means that, the way in which we approach certain concepts, the way we approach certain ideals about what we think is possible or not, You have to come back and look at the chemistry and see the way we're set up. See, I have no problem seeing the Godhead, seeing it for what it is in terms of its mechanics, and turning my back on it. You see, what we're looking at is the programming of mind. It's mind that's being programmed by the crystal bundles. Remember that, mind. And as long as mind is making decisions, then Parvati has her share of power. And we can see how pervasive that power can be. It can dip into just about every corner of the being. And we know it as evidence of the not-self world. We see the not-self world. We see the role of womankind in the world today. We see that the demands that are there in Parvati's program are fulfilled on this plane every day. Every day. This thinking permeates. You see it in so many societies on this planet. It is extraordinary how it is ingrained into these societies. Very, very, very difficult thing to break out of that mold. Because it's about the mind world. It's about the not-self mind world. See, if your mind is making decisions, boy, does she have power over you. You know, it reminds me the first time that I saw an ancient Greek play. And there was a chorus, and the chorus represented various gods' voices. And, it was the gods that were speaking directly through humankind. Many associate this with the awakening of mind. I associate it with the perfection of the not-self program. You see, the gods do speak directly through our minds. Every time you hear somebody in some other society defining the role of woman as fertile felicitator of the marriage and devotee to the spouse, well, we know who's talking. It's not them. It is the action of this chemistry in them. It is the goddess herself speaking out of their mouth. Hidden agent that she is, masking her voice until it's deeply male, Our planet is dense with it. I could go on and on about my concern for the education of young girls. It doesn't do very much good. I'm well aware of that. I would feel terrible if I didn't say anything, so I just say it anyway. But, the cards are stacked. You can see the way the program organizes things, the way it works. Every single one of these Godheads has an incredible potential in the way in which it controls the homogenized consciousness plane. As we've been making our journey, you can see that every step is a dimension of the way in which humanity looks at the world. And yet there are differences in faces. There are differences because we see them in relationship to the body graph, not just chemistry, not just the mythology, but right there in the construct. And you see, when you see a face like this, and you see it's so adrenalized, there is so much pressure on this that it's everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. You know, you wherever you look, I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, the United States, as an example, prides itself on being an advanced nation. But if you take the percentage of women that serve in state houses and congresses, and you know, if you take the number of women that are the heads of Fortune 500 corporations, and on and on and on and on and on, you know, it's all a lie. Of course it's a lie. There's always exceptions. They get a lot of press. You know, it's the same way when you know, there's a black man that's running a successful major corporation. You know, they get a lot of press. Minorities always get press in that moment where they can achieve something that's normal for the majority. But it's a lie. You know, this chemistry is a mental distortion field. It just is. You know, I always joke that men are stupid, but of course they are. And it takes a lot of work to wake up a male. I mean, it takes a lot of work. And it's not their fault, by the way. It's nobody's fault. It is the way the program runs it. Program didn't do males any good, giving females this burden. Didn't at all. But then again, you know, the program is built around the form principle, and it's not built around the yang principle at all. The yang principle is used. It seems the other way around if you look at it the way we're discussing it today. But in fact, the yang is the most dispensable of all things. The round comes to an end, the yang goes away. But still, in the movie, because it is a movie, in the movie, there is a terrible burden that's placed on womankind when the not-self rules. You know, this is, and it's so clear. I mean, it's been so clear to me throughout my entire career. The vast majority of my students are women, have always been women. They're the ones that know that something's wrong. They've always known that something's wrong. You know, the only thing you can ever do is that you leave mental decision-making behind. That's all you can do. I mean, it's so interesting, you know, this concept of what is a liberated woman, quote unquote. You know, liberation for me for a woman is when she operates out of her own authority. It's the same liberation for a man, by the way, but nonetheless. Because that's the liberation. I mean, after all, this is mental programming. I mean, yes, there are biological components of, you know, the disadvantages of female, but this is programmed on the mental plane. You know, this heavy work here of this face. And you escape that by, you know, no longer being caught in mental decision making. And it's the same thing for the males in your life. That is, it's the only way that they can begin to change the way in which they relate to the female principle. I mean, as long as they're being programmed mentally by this, they're never going to properly be able to relate to the female principle. They just won't. And again, it's the same solution, because after all, you know, the mind only changes when you can let go of it. You know, otherwise it can't change. You know, you got to let go of it. You've got to trust something else. You trust your inner authority. Slowly but surely, perception changes. Clarity comes, and you can cut through the nature of this chemistry. We cannot be without it, by the way. You know, I'm not talking about healing the world. I never do. It's all fractals. It's all about those that are lucky enough. But again, the magic of having this knowledge is that this knowledge is for individuals. It isn't for a class, a race, a nation, a planet. It isn't. It's what I love so deeply about it. It's just for one person at any given time. One person. This is what it's about. It's the opportunity to have your own authority. When you have your own authority, none of these things are any more than interesting. Interesting. And so it should be. It's interesting to see how it works. This is being free of this. And that you can see no matter what the political stance is, no matter what the gibberish is, the propaganda, the this and that, whatever the case may be, as long as we live in a world of the not-self, as long as we live in a world in which the mind makes decision, then faces like this become our own face, profoundly so. Become the face that, is emblematic of, the myth. There was this other picture I was going to select this morning, or today, rather than this one. And it's a picture of her and Shiva, her husband, sitting together in one of those. It looked exactly like the kind of thing that you'd see in some fancy magazine of some Hollywood couple putting on this incredible, don't we love each other face? Aren't we happy in our world together face? I mean, we've seen thousands of these pictures. Because that's the face that it creates. Yeah. I do so enjoy deconstructing the Godhead, I must say. And I don't think that there's any lecture that I've ever given that I felt more uncomfortable doing than this one. But what to do? This is the nature of the program. Anyway, to all of you, as always, I enjoy sharing my Abisa morning with you. And all of you take care. Enjoy the movie. Bye for now.